I stood in the doorway of my workshop and looked at the empty space where my father's 1952 Vincent Black Shadow had rested for the past 43 years. The concrete still held the faint outline of where the center stand had pressed down through decades, and a small dark circle marked the spot where the gearbox had once seeped a single drop of oil every winter morning. My wife of 36 years stood behind me with her arms crossed, smiling the kind of smile a person wears when they think they have done something clever. "It's gone, Harold," she said. "I sold that ugly old motorbike this morning. Got $55,000 for it. Cash. Can you believe it? For that rusty thing you keep polishing every Sunday." I did not turn around. I just kept staring at the empty patch of concrete, and I felt something inside my chest go very still. Not angry, not sad, just still. The way a pond goes still, right before the wind picks up. "Margaret," I said quietly. "Who did you sell it to?" "Some bloke from a dealership up in Toowoomba. Drove down with a trailer this morning while you were at the doctor's. He was thrilled, said it would clean up nicely. Now we can finally take that cruise around New Zealand my sister keeps talking about. And we'll have plenty left over to redo the kitchen." "I told you that motorbike was just sitting there gathering dust, Harold. I told you for years." I closed the workshop door behind me and walked into the kitchen, where her sister Beverly and Beverly's husband Trevor were already pouring champagne into the good crystal glasses my mother had given us as a wedding present. Beverly raised her glass when she saw me and let out a little whoop. "There he is, the man of the hour. Come on, Harold, don't be a sourpuss." Margaret finally got rid of that eyesore. 55 grand, mate, for a pile of old metal." Trevor clapped me on the shoulder, hard enough to sting. "Should have done it years ago, mate. That shed could be a granny flat by now. Income property. You ever think about that? Course you didn't. You were too busy polishing chrome." I let them talk. I let them laugh and clink their glasses and tell each other how clever Margaret had been. I let Beverly start describing the cabin on the cruise ship she had already picked out. And I let Trevor hold forth about how blokes my age needed to let go of their toys. I sat down at the kitchen table and accepted a glass of champagne. I had no intention of drinking, and I waited. Because here is the thing none of them knew. Here is the thing my wife had never bothered to ask in 36 years of marriage. The Vincent Black Shadow she had just sold for $55,000 was not just any 1,952 motorbike. It was one of only 31 factory-modified Series C Black Shadows built for the 1,952 Isle of Man trials, and the engine inside it had been hand-tuned by Phil Irving himself. My father had bought it in 1953 from a returning serviceman in Melbourne, and he had given it to me on my 21st birthday in 1968 with a stack of documentation that filled an entire steamer trunk. Receipts, photographs, letters from Phil Irving, the original Isle of Man entry papers, even a handwritten note from George Brown confirming the engine specifications. I had spent 57 years preserving every single piece of that history. The current auction value, as of the last appraisal I had done in Sydney 3 months ago, was somewhere between $420,000 and $470,000. The Australian Vincent Owners Club had a standing offer of $400,000 for it, sight unseen, on the condition that it remain in Australia. I sipped my champagne and listened to my wife tell her sister about the cruise. The phone rang at 23 minutes past 4 that afternoon. Margaret was the one who answered it, because she was closest, and I watched her face go from pink and pleased to gray and confused in the space of about 10 seconds. "What do you mean, the police?" she said into the receiver. "What do you mean, fraud? I sold you that motorbike, fair and square this morning. I have the paperwork. Harold, what is going on? Why are the police at the dealership?" I set down my glass. Trevor had stopped talking. Beverly had stopped pouring. The only sound in the kitchen was the small tinny voice on the other end of the phone, And even from across the room I could hear the man shouting, "Why are the police in my office? Why are they asking about you, Mrs. Whitfield? This bike. This isn't what you said it was. The Vincent Owners Club rang my office 2 hours ago. They had alerts out for this exact bike. They've had alerts out for 15 years in case anyone tried to move it. The serial numbers, the engine numbers, everything matches a registered heritage motorcycle. Mrs. Whitfield, did you have authorization to sell this bike?" Margaret's hand started shaking so badly the receiver clicked against her ear. She looked at me. For the first time all afternoon, she actually looked at me. "Harold," she said. "Harold, what did I sell?" I stood up slowly. I walked over to her. I took the phone from her hand, and I spoke to the man on the other end. "This is Harold Whitfield speaking. I am the registered owner of that motorcycle. I did not authorize its sale. I will be at your dealership in Toowoomba within 90 minutes. Please instruct the constables to wait for me." I hung up the phone. I turned to my wife. I turned to her sister. I turned to Trevor, who had gone the color of old porridge. "That motorbike," I said, in the same quiet voice I had used in the workshop, "is worth $420,000. Possibly more. The Vincent Owners Club has been monitoring it for 15 years because it is one of the most significant racing motorcycles in Australian history. You sold it for $55,000. To a dealer who is now sitting in a room with the Queensland Police because a stolen heritage vehicle has just landed in his showroom." Beverly's champagne glass slipped out of her hand and shattered on the kitchen tiles. "And Margaret," I continued, still very quiet, "since the title to that motorbike is in my name and has been since 1968, I am very curious to learn how exactly you produced a transfer document that satisfied a licensed dealer. Because the only signature that could legally transfer that motorcycle is mine. And I have not signed anything." She started to cry. Not the soft kind of crying. The kind of crying a person does when something inside them realizes it has gone too far to walk back. I drove to Toowoomba alone. I left her in the kitchen with her sister, and I did not say goodbye. The dealer's name was Marcus Kettering, and he was a decent enough bloke who had clearly been having the worst afternoon of his career. There were 2 constables in his office, a senior sergeant from Toowoomba CIB and a small man in a tweed jacket who introduced himself as Jeffrey Pendleton from the Vincent Owners Club. Jeffrey had driven up from Brisbane the moment he had received the alert. He was nearly 70 years old, and he had tears in his eyes when he saw me walk in. "Harold," he said. "Harold, please tell me she's intact." "She's intact, Jeffrey. I checked her over before I left the house. The bike is in the back of Mr. Kettering's workshop, and she has not been touched." Jeffrey actually crossed himself. The senior sergeant, a woman named Detective Senior Sergeant Aroha Faulkner, asked me to sit down and explain everything from the beginning. So I did. I told her about my father buying the bike in 1953. I told her about the steamer trunk of documentation. I told her that the Vincent had been registered in my name continuously since the 4th of March, 1968, and that I had a folder at home with every annual registration renewal, every insurance certificate, and every Vincent Owners Club membership card going back to my first one in 1971. Then I told her about my wife, Mr. Whitfield. Detective Faulkner said carefully, "The document Mr. Kettering received this morning included a signed bill of sale and a transfer of registration. Both bear your signature. Did you sign these documents?" "No." "You're certain?" "Detective, I have not signed a single document relating to that motorcycle in over 4 years. The last time I signed anything was when I renewed the comprehensive insurance in 2022. She slid 2 pieces of paper across the desk toward me. I looked at them. Then I looked at her. "That is not my signature," I said. "It is not even close to my signature. I sign my name with the H connected to the W, and I have done so since I was 14 years old. Whoever signed these documents has tried to copy my signature, but they have written it as two separate words. Jeffrey leaned over to look. Harold, I've signed Owners Club paperwork with you for 50 years. That is not your hand. Detective Faulkner nodded slowly and made a note in her book. Mr. Whitfield, I have to ask you a difficult question. Do you wish to press charges against your wife? I looked at the empty space on the desk between us. I thought about the workshop. I thought about my father, who had ridden that motorbike home from Melbourne in 1953 with a tent strapped to the back and a head full of dreams. I thought about my 21st birthday when he had handed me the keys and said, "Take care of her, son. She'll outlive both of us if you do." "Yes," I said. "I wish to press charges. Forgery, fraud, theft, whatever applies." The detective wrote it all down. I came home at nearly midnight. The house was dark, except for the kitchen light. Margaret was sitting at the table where Beverly and Trevor had been celebrating 6 hours earlier. The champagne was gone. The good crystal had been put away. She looked at me when I walked in, and I could see she had been crying for a very long time. "Harold," she said, "please. I didn't know. You didn't ask. It was just an old motorbike. I thought I was helping. I thought I was doing something useful, with that thing taking up space. It was my father's, Margaret. You have known that for 36 years. You came to his funeral. You watched me cry over his coffin. And every Sunday for 36 years you have made jokes about how I love that bike more than I love you. And every Sunday I have laughed because I thought you were teasing. I did not realize you actually meant it." She put her face in her hands. "How did you forge my signature?" I traced it. "From an old letter you wrote to your cousin in 2019. I practiced for a few weeks. I told myself it didn't matter, because the bike was just sitting there. And the registration transfer? You needed identification for that." She did not answer. "Margaret, did you take my driver's license?" I copied it. "On the printer. I told the dealer you were my husband, and you were too sick to come in person. I told him you wanted the bike gone, and you'd asked me to handle it because of your back. My back is fine. I know." I sat down across from her. I had loved this woman for 36 years. I had built her a vegetable garden and held her hand through her mother's death and learned to cook because she hated cooking and put up shelves in every room of every house we ever lived in. I had thought we were going to grow old together. The two of us. With the workshop full of motorbikes and the spare room full of grandchildren. I pressed charges, Margaret. The police will be coming tomorrow. I imagine they will want to speak with Beverly and Trevor as well, since they were here this afternoon celebrating what they almost certainly knew was a fraudulent sale. Beverly didn't know. Beverly is a 40-year veteran of the legal aid office, Margaret. She knew exactly what was happening. So did Trevor. He is a real estate agent, and he understood every word of what you did this morning. They came over to celebrate because they thought they were going to get a cut of $55,000 that did not belong to any of you. Her face crumpled. Where will I go? I don't know. That is no longer my concern. I will be filing for divorce on Monday. I would suggest you call your sister. I went to bed in the spare room. I lay awake for a long time, looking at the ceiling, and I felt the strangest thing. I felt lighter than I had in years. The next 3 months were the worst and best of my life, all at once. The police investigation moved quickly because the evidence was overwhelming. Margaret was charged with forgery, fraud, theft, and uttering. Beverly was charged with conspiracy and as an accessory after the fact, because the police pulled her phone records and found she had been advising Margaret on how to do all of it for nearly 6 weeks. Trevor was charged with the same. The dealer, Marcus Kettering, was cleared because he had acted in good faith, and he ended up becoming a friend of mine. He drove the Vincent back to my workshop himself, in his own trailer, and refused to take a cent for it. The divorce moved more slowly, but it moved. My solicitor was a sharp young woman named Priya Sandanam, and she made very short work of Margaret's claims to half of everything. The motorbike was excluded from the marital pool because it had been gifted to me before the marriage. The house was technically marital property, but Margaret's criminal conviction made the family court take a rather dim view of her requests, and in the end, I kept the house and the workshop and most of our savings. She kept her car, her clothes, and a settlement that was just enough to pay her legal fees. Beverly and Trevor pleaded down to suspended sentences. Margaret did not. She had been the principal in the offense. She had used a forged document to deceive a licensed dealer, and the value of the property involved pushed the whole thing into a more serious category than her solicitor had hoped. She was sentenced to 2 years in custody, with eligibility for parole after 8 months. I did not attend the sentencing. What I did attend, 3 weeks after the sentencing, was the annual rally of the Australian Vincent Owners Club, held that year in Bathurst. Geoffrey Pendleton had rung me personally and asked me to bring the Black Shadow. He had said the club wanted to do something for me. I assumed he meant a small dinner. I rode the Vincent to Bathurst over 2 days, taking the long way through the Blue Mountains, sleeping at a pub in Lithgow, and arriving at the rally site on a Saturday morning in late autumn. There were about 300 bikes there, and easily twice that many people. And when I rolled into the main paddock, the entire place went quiet. Then they started clapping. 300 motorcyclists, most of them my age or older, all standing up and clapping. Some of them were crying. A bloke I had never met in my life walked over and shook my hand for nearly a minute without saying anything. Geoffrey came out of the registration tent with a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, the bike you are looking at is the 1952 Series C Black Shadow Factory Racing Modification, Isle of Man entry number 19. There are 31 of these in the world. There are 11 of them still running. There is exactly one of them in Australia, and you are looking at her. Her custodian for the past 57 years is my friend Harold Whitfield. 6 months ago, this bike very nearly disappeared forever. Harold fought for her. Harold paid a very high personal price to keep her with us. So today, the Australian Vincent Owners Club would like to recognize Harold as our Custodian of the Year, an honor we have given out exactly 4 times in 72 years. They presented me with a small bronze plaque. I shook a great many hands. Men older than my father told me stories about my father, whom many of them had ridden with in the 1960s. A woman in her 80s told me she had once danced with my dad at a club function in 1962 and had never forgotten his blue eyes. That night, sitting around a fire pit with Geoffrey and a half-dozen other old riders, I realized something that hit me harder than anything that had happened in the last 6 months. These strangers, gathered around a fire in Bathurst, had honored my father and my motorbike and my 57 years of stewardship more in one afternoon than my wife had in 36 years of marriage. They saw me. They saw what the bike meant. They understood, without me having to explain, why a man might polish a piece of British engineering every Sunday for half a century. Margaret had never asked me, not once, why the Vincent mattered. I went home from Bathurst, and I changed my will. The motorbike, along with the steamer trunk of documentation and the workshop and a substantial portion of my estate, went to the Australian Vincent Owners Club with the requirement that the Black Shadow be displayed at their Heritage Museum in Adelaide and ridden at least once a year by a member of the club's preservation committee. The rest of my estate went to 2 charities my father had supported, the Royal Flying Doctor Service and a small organization that provides motorcycles and training to remote area nurses in the outback. Margaret had 3 grown nieces and nephews she had been planning to leave things to. I left them nothing. They had all been at my house at one time or another over the years, and not one of them had ever asked me about my work, or my bikes, or my father. I felt no obligation. I am 68 years old now. Margaret was paroled after 9 months and moved to Cairns to live with Beverly, who eventually got her job back at Legal Aid because suspended sentences do not always kill careers in the way you might hope. I have not spoken to either of them since the divorce was finalized. Trevor and Beverly are still married, as far as I know, although Trevor's real estate license was suspended for a year, and that took a bite out of their lifestyle. My workshop now houses 3 motorbikes. The Vincent Black Shadow, of course. A 1965 Norton Atlas I bought last year as a project, and a 1978 Ducati 900 SS that belonged to a mate of mine who passed away and left it to me in his will. I ride one of them every Sunday, weather permitting, and on the second Saturday of every month, I host a workshop morning where local young people who are interested in classic motorcycles can come over and learn how to clean a carburetor or set valve clearances. Jeffrey Pendleton drives down from Brisbane sometimes to help. So does Marcus Kettering, the dealer who got dragged into all of this without asking for any of it. I have a circle of friends now that I did not have before any of this happened. Most of them are men in their 60s and 70s who understand things about life that you cannot understand any other way. I have a girlfriend. If a man my age can use that word without feeling ridiculous. Her name is Eleanor. She is 65. She is a retired nurse who used to ride a Triumph Tiger Cub in her 20s, and she came to one of my workshop mornings last spring to ask if I could help her get her late husband's BSA Bantam running again. We did. She rides it now. And she rides on the back of the Vincent on long Sundays. And she laughs at all my jokes, including the bad ones. I want to say something before I finish telling this story. To anyone who has listened this far, if you are married to someone or related to someone who has spent decades dismissing the things you love, I want you to understand something I had to learn the very hard way. They are not teasing. They are not joking. When someone tells you for 30 years that the thing you care about is rubbish, they mean it. And one day they will act on what they mean, and you will be standing in an empty workshop, staring at an oil stain on the concrete. Pay attention. Listen to what the people in your life actually tell you, especially when they tell you with their actions instead of their words. A spouse who has never asked you a single question about your father in 36 years is telling you something. A sister-in-law who pours champagne the moment your most precious possession leaves the house is telling you something. The signs are always there, long before the betrayal. Most of us just do not want to see them. And to anyone who has been told your whole life that what you love does not matter, that your hobbies are silly, that your interests are childish, that the things you have spent decades preserving are just clutter taking up space. I want you to know that there are communities of people out there who will see you. There are strangers who will respect you within the first hour of meeting you, in ways your own family never has. Find them. Go and find them. Do not wait until you are 68 years old and standing in front of an empty patch of concrete. Take care of the things your father gave you. And take care of the people who understand why those things matter. The rest of it, the marriages and the in-laws and the cousins who never asked, will sort itself out one way or another. The Vincent is in the workshop tonight. I can hear the soft tick of cooling metal from the kitchen, where Eleanor is making tea. Tomorrow morning I will polish her, the way I have polished her every Sunday for 57 years. And the morning after that, I will start her up and ride her down the Toowoomba Road just to feel the wind. My father would be pleased, I think. That is enough for a man my age.